My older brother's voice carried from the small living room, the phone left on speaker by mistake while he thought I was still outside with the bags. Yeah, Tyler, she's still playing the generous one like always. Paid for the whole cabin setup and Dad's follow-up tests without saying a word, but we both know it's just another way to rewrite the story. Dad already told me the real version years ago. The family success line was never true. He needed the quiet money to keep the bank from knocking, and she stepped in because it made her look like the responsible one. I forwarded the email thread last night. The part where he admits the old photo of Mom was staged to hide how bad things really got. That's the angle your readers will eat up once this health scare weekend is over. Keep it between us until we're back in the city. She won't see it coming. Generosity only works when the other person stays quiet, and I'm done staying quiet for her. Once the article drops, the whole controlled version of our family dies. She can keep the cabin receipt if it makes her feel important. Hi, my name is Sophia Grant, I am 33 years old. I stood just inside the doorway of the Smoky Mountains cabin, one hand still on the strap of my overnight bag, and let the last of his words settle. The drive up from Knoxville had already been sharp enough. Daniel had spent most of the 2 hours picking at every decision I had made about Dad's care, turning my offer to cover the cabin and the follow-up tests into proof that I was trying to buy control of the family story. Dad had sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, saying nothing. That silence had told me everything I needed to know about where the leak had started. Daniel ended the call and I heard the soft click of the phone being set down. I stepped the rest of the way inside and closed the door behind me with the same careful movement I used at work when a client tried to rattle me. The cabin smelled of pine and the faint trace of whatever cleaner Patricia Lowe, the local caretaker, had used earlier that week. I kept my face even. Daniel turned from the small table near the window, saw me, and offered the easy half-smile he had perfected years ago. Sophia. You made good time. I was just checking in with a friend about some work stuff. I nodded once. I heard. His expression didn't change, but something small and satisfied moved behind his eyes. He had wanted me to hear. That was the point of leaving the speaker on. Dad came in a moment later carrying his small suitcase. He looked smaller than he had even a month ago, the health scare still sitting in the lines around his mouth. He glanced between us, read the temperature in the room the way he always did, and chose the path of least resistance. Daniel, help me get the rest of the bags in before it gets dark, he said. Daniel didn't move right away. He kept his eyes on me. Sophia's already handled most of it. She's good at handling things. Paying for things. Making sure everyone knows who made the arrangements. The words were light. The cut underneath was not. I set my bag down on the bench by the door and walked past both of them into the kitchen area. The old wooden table had already been wiped clean. A stack of mail someone had forwarded sat in the center. On top of the stack was a single photograph in a plain frame, the kind of family picture that used to sit on the mantel back home. I recognized it immediately. Mom, Dad, Daniel, and me, taken the summer I turned 12. We were all smiling at the camera on the front porch of the old house. The smiles looked real enough if you didn't know better. I didn't touch the frame. I simply noted that someone had placed it here, in this cabin, for this particular weekend. Then I turned back to the two men still standing near the door. Dad needs to rest, I said, my voice even. The doctor said no stress for at least 2 weeks. I can get the groceries and the prescriptions sorted while you two bring in the rest of the bags. Daniel let out a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. There it is again. The quiet management. You don't even raise your voice when you're taking over. I met his gaze and held it. I'm not taking over. I'm making sure the reason we came here actually happens. Dad shifted his weight, the suitcase handle creaking in his hand. He still didn't speak. The silence between the three of us stretched until Daniel finally shrugged and stepped outside. Dad followed a moment later without looking at me. I stayed in the kitchen. The photograph stayed on the table where I could see it from the corner of my eye. I didn't need to turn it over to know there would be something written on the back. Not yet. That could wait until I was alone. While they brought in the last bags, I moved through the small rooms, checking that the heat was set low the way the doctor had ordered, that the bedroom Dad would use had the extra pillows already arranged. Patricia Lowe had done most of the setup exactly as I had asked when I called her 2 days ago. She had even left a note on the counter with her cell number in case anything came up with the well or the generator. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. Daniel came back inside carrying the last duffel and dropped it harder than necessary near the couch. "Tyler's going to love the story once I fill in the gaps," he said, not quite under his breath. The generous daughter who rewrote the family history with her checkbook. Dad already gave me the emails. The ones where he had to ask you for the money to keep the old house from going under. You made him sign something, didn't you? Some quiet agreement so nobody would know how bad it really was. I kept my hands busy folding a blanket over the arm of the couch. The motion was steady. Inside, something small and sharp settled into place. Those emails existed. I had seen the originals years ago when Dad first came to me. I had never asked him to sign anything. I had simply transferred the money and told him to use it however he needed. The story Daniel was building with Tyler Reed was already half written before we ever left the city. Dad stood in the doorway to the small hallway, watching both of us. His face was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the drive. He knew exactly which emails Daniel meant. He had been the one who forwarded them. I straightened the blanket one last time and looked at my father. "You told him," I said. It wasn't a question. Dad's mouth tightened. He didn't deny it. He simply turned and walked down the short hall to the bedroom Patricia had prepared for him. The door closed with a soft click. Daniel stayed where he was, arms crossed, that same satisfied expression still sitting on his face. "Some stories need to be told straight for once," he said. "You've had the clean version for years. Time someone heard the real one." I didn't answer him. I walked to the small desk near the window where someone had left a laptop open. The screen was still glowing. An email thread sat open in the browser, the subject line visible even from a few feet away. "The real numbers on the old house, keep this between us." I didn't click on it. I simply noted that it was there, that Daniel had left it open on purpose, and that the thread was longer than I expected. Then I closed the laptop gently and turned back to my brother. "Dad needs quiet," I said again. "I'm going to start dinner. You can help or you can keep making calls. Either way, the doctor's instructions stay the same." Daniel studied me for a long moment. The satisfaction in his face flickered into something colder when I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. "You always did know how to make everyone else feel like the difficult one," he said. I didn't argue. I simply moved past him into the kitchen and began unpacking the groceries I had brought. Behind me, Daniel picked up his phone again. This time he took it into the bedroom and closed the door. The photograph on the table caught the last of the afternoon light coming through the window. I didn't turn it over. Not yet. There would be time for that later, when the cabin was quiet and I could read whatever message had been left on the back without an audience. For now I focused on the simple tasks in front of me. Cutting vegetables. Setting water to boil. Making sure the evening stayed exactly as the doctor had ordered. The rest of it, the emails, the phone call, the story Daniel was already shaping with Tyler Reed, could wait until I had steadied myself enough to decide. What came next? If you've ever watched someone you trusted turn the quiet things you did for your family into material for someone else's version of the truth, you know the particular kind of stillness that follows. I stayed in that stillness while the water came to a boil and the cabin settled around us. Daniel's voice was a low murmur behind the closed bedroom door. Dad hadn't come out of his room. The photograph waited on the table. I stirred the pot and kept my breathing even. The first cut had already been made. I just didn't know yet how deep it was going to go. The evening settled into the kind of quiet that only happens when everyone in a room is choosing their words carefully. I finished the simple dinner and set the plates on the table without comment. Daniel took the seat across from me. Dad stayed in his room with the door half open, the way he had done for years whenever tension rose. He could hear us. He simply chose not to join. Daniel picked up his fork, then set it down again. Tyler thinks the angle about the staged photo is strong. The one from that summer. He wants the backstory on why Mom really left and why we all pretended otherwise. Dad already filled in most of it. I kept my hands on my own plate. Dad told you that story a long time ago. You're choosing to repeat it now. He told me because he was tired of carrying it alone, Daniel said. The sarcasm was soft but precise. You were always the one who got to decide which parts of our life stayed private and which parts got rewritten as Sophia fixed everything. Generous with the money. Generous with the silence. It worked until it didn't. I took a slow bite of the food I had cooked. The taste was ordinary. The conversation was not. If you want to talk about what actually happened with the old house, we can do that. But not while Dad is supposed to be resting. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That's the thing about your version. It always sounds reasonable. You pay the bills, you arrange the cabin, you tell everyone to keep their voices down. And somehow the rest of us end up looking like the problem for wanting the real story told. I met his eyes across the table. The real story includes the part where I transferred the money without asking for anything in return. The part where the emails you forwarded were never meant to become content for someone else's article. He smiled, small and sharp. Tyler's not someone else. He's a friend who knows how to separate fact from the family fiction we've been selling for years. You should be grateful someone's finally willing to write it straight. I did not answer. I finished the rest of my meal in the same even rhythm I used at work when a negotiation turned hostile. When I stood to clear the plates, Daniel stayed seated. Dad's not going to back you on this, he said to my back. He already chose which side the truth belongs on. I rinsed the dishes without turning around. The water ran steady. Behind me, Daniel's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed it back. A moment later his bedroom door closed again. The low murmur of another phone call started almost immediately. I dried my hands and walked to the small desk. The laptop was still there. I opened it. The email thread was exactly where Daniel had left it. I scrolled without clicking anything new, just far enough to see the chain. Dad's messages to Daniel went back months, not days. One from 3 weeks before the health scare read, "She thinks paying for the tests gives her the right to decide what we tell people. It doesn't. Send Tyler whatever you need. I'm done protecting her version." Another, older, the photo was staged. She knows it. She's the one who told Mom to smile for the camera that day so the neighbors wouldn't ask questions. I closed the laptop before I reached the end. The words were enough. The controlled version of our family that I had spent years quietly maintaining was already being dismantled from the inside, one forwarded message at a time. Daniel hadn't started this weekend. He had simply decided the cabin was the right place to finish it. I turned toward the mantel. The framed photograph still sat on the kitchen table where someone had left it earlier. I picked it up. The glass was cool against my fingers. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, were 2 lines. Written in the same careful print he used for checks, "This is the story we agreed to tell." Sophia made sure no one asked what was really happening. She paid for the silence the same way she paid for everything else. I read it twice. Then I set the frame face down on the table so the message was no longer visible. The gesture was small. It changed nothing about what I had just learned, but it gave me one clear boundary I could hold onto for the rest of the night. Patricia Lowe called a little after 8. Her voice on the other end of the line was practical and kind, the way it had been when I arranged the cabin rental. She asked if the heat was working and whether we needed extra wood brought up in the morning. I told her everything was fine. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Your brother called me earlier asking for the Wi-Fi password again. Said he needed to send some documents for work. I gave it to him. Hope that was all right." I thanked her and ended the call. The documents were the emails. Or the photo. Or both. Tyler Reed now had whatever connection speed the cabin offered. I walked back to the living room. The cabin felt smaller than it had when we arrived. Daniel's door was still closed. Dad's light was off. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand and opened the Notes app. I did not write anything yet. I simply stared at the blank screen and let the facts line up in order. Daniel had been feeding a journalist private family details for months. Dad had given him permission and the material to do it. My quiet payments for the house, the medical tests, and this cabin had been turned into proof that I was buying control of the narrative. The old photograph now carried a written confirmation of the lie we had all lived inside. The first cut had been the overheard phone call. This was the second. I could feel the shape of what came next, even if I did not have the words for it yet. I stood up, turned off the main light, and left the photograph face down on the table. In the dark I could still see the faint outline of the frame. I did not pick it up again. I walked to the bedroom Patricia had prepared for me and closed the door behind me with the same careful movement I had used all evening. Tomorrow the light would come through the cabin windows and Daniel would keep pushing. Dad would keep choosing silence. Tyler Reed would keep receiving whatever Daniel decided to send. I would still be here, still paying attention, still refusing to give them the reaction that would make the story they were writing easier to sell. The controlled version was already cracking. I just had not decided yet whether I would let it finish breaking or whether I would walk away from the pieces before they could cut any deeper. The next morning the light came through the cabin windows in clean, ordinary lines. I woke before anyone else and made coffee in the small kitchen. The photograph still lay face down on the table where I had left it. I turned it over once, read the 2 lines on the back again, and left it exactly where it was. Daniel came out first. He saw the frame, saw that I had read it, and chose not to comment. He poured his own coffee and leaned against the counter. "Tyler's almost done with the draft," he said. "He wants one more detail about how you handled the old house payments. Dad already confirmed the amounts. It makes the control angle cleaner." I set my mug down. "I read the full thread last night. Every message Dad sent you. Every instruction he gave about what to forward and what to leave out." Daniel's expression stayed light. "Then you know he was tired of the version you were selling. The one where you were the quiet savior and the rest of us were just along for the ride." "I never asked anyone to call me that," I said. "I paid the bills because the alternative was watching the house go under and Dad lose everything he had left. You turned that into content." He shrugged. "Content is just another word for the truth when the polite version stops working. You've had years to control the story. I'm giving someone else a turn." Dad appeared in the hallway then. He looked at the photograph on the table, then at both of us. For the first time since we arrived he spoke without being prompted. "I told Daniel what he needed," he said. His voice was tired but steady. "You kept fixing things and expecting us to pretend the fixes never happened. I got tired of the pretending." The words landed without heat. They simply confirmed what the emails had already shown. He had chosen Daniel's version over any conversation with me. The betrayal was not new. It had only become visible here, in this cabin, because Daniel had decided the health scare gave him cover to finish what he started months ago. I nodded once. "Then there's nothing left to discuss about the story." The payments for Dad's care end today. I've already arranged for Dr. Elena Vargas to coordinate anything medical through her office directly. Patricia Lowe will handle the cabin check-ins. If either of you need me for an actual emergency, you can reach me through her. Otherwise we're done. Daniel set his mug down harder than necessary. You think walking away fixes anything? Tyler still has the emails. The article still runs. If it runs with the version you've given him, I will send him the complete thread with the dates and the context he is missing, I said. Including the part where Dad asked you to keep certain messages between the two of you. I will also send a copy to the lawyer who handled the original transfers. That is not a threat. It is the only boundary I am setting. The cabin stayed quiet for a long moment. Daniel looked at Dad, waiting for backup that did not come. Dad simply turned and went back down the short hall to his room. The door closed. Daniel stayed where he was. The sarcasm had left his face. What remained was colder and more direct. You always did know how to make the reasonable choice sound like punishment, he said. I picked up the photograph, slipped it into my bag without looking at the back again, and answered without raising my voice. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm stopping the performance. You can keep the version you and Dad built. I won't carry it anymore. He didn't answer. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, and packed the few things I had brought. Patricia Lowe arrived mid-morning with extra wood as she had promised on the phone the night before. She saw the tension in the room but said nothing beyond a quiet greeting. When I asked her to keep an eye on Dad's medications and to call Dr. Vargas if anything changed, she nodded without asking why the arrangements had shifted. By early afternoon the car was loaded. Daniel stood on the small porch watching me put the last bag in the trunk. He didn't offer to help. He didn't ask me to stay. The final thing he said before I closed the door was delivered in the same even tone he had used on the phone with Tyler. Some people need the clean story to survive. You're the one who decided the rest of us didn't get to choose anymore. I looked at him across the short distance of the driveway. I decided I wouldn't keep paying for a story that required me to disappear inside it. Then I got in the car and drove away from the cabin. The road down the mountain was empty. I kept both hands on the wheel and my breathing steady. The photograph sat in the passenger seat, still face down. I did not turn it over again. 2 days later Tyler Reed emailed me directly. He had received the full thread I sent him along with a short note explaining the dates and the original context of the transfers. He wrote that he was pausing the piece. He did not apologize. He simply said the story no longer looked like the one he had been given. I did not reply. Daniel called once the following week. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. He said Dad was doing better and that he would handle the next round of tests through Dr. Vargas. He did not ask me to come back. I deleted the message without saving it. I have not spoken to either of them since. The cabin remains in my name because I paid for the rental, but I have not returned. Patricia Lowe sends a brief monthly note confirming everything is in order. I read the notes and file them. I do not call. The old photograph sits in a box in my closet now, still face down. I have not looked at the back again. Some inherited stories end when the people who were supposed to carry them decide the truth is too expensive to keep. I learned that. Protecting my dignity meant accepting the loss of those stories rather than continuing to pay for a version that required me to vanish inside them. Real family does not ask you to disappear so the comfortable lie can stay intact. When they do, the only choice left that does not cost your self-respect is to stop carrying the lie for them. The piece that comes afterward is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply remains once you have stopped performing the role they wrote for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If your older brother ever turned the quiet things you did for your family into material he could hand to someone else, and your father chose to let it happen, how did you decide what pieces of the story were still yours to keep? Comment healing if this helped.